see again from our library is when you take the omega-3 polyphenol combination, which is in balance oil, the omega-3s do get to the peripheral tissues. They are built into the cell membranes, and they are done. This happens very consistently, very reliably, and in a time frame that is no more than 120 days. And that is a huge problem right there, because a lot of people have been taught by the medical model, if you have a problem, take an aspirin, take whatever this is, it'll fix your problem. It'll take the symptoms away quickly. We can't do that. What we see is a really unhealthy population that's being poisoned by the multinational food companies, by the processed and ultra-processed foods that we consume today. And that poisoning takes place over decades. It's a slow process. That degeneration, that deterioration of cell membrane structures caused by the modern diet develops over time. And when we remedy it, which we can do with balance oil, that is also a slow process. We can't really speed it up because there's a rate limiting step here, which is the rate of turnover of the phosphatidyl phospholipids in your cell membranes. We can't accelerate that. So taking balance oil, we're trying to take an oil tanker, turn it around, and it's a little slow to respond. 4 months to get to below 5:1. Many people will start to see improvements before that, especially if they're starting off from a really bad ratio. So yeah, it's a step on from fish oil. It's fish oil plus plus plus. It's fish oil working as nature designed it to work. And when I first published my paper about this, I have to say the fish oil industry really hated me for it. I would go to meetings and conferences, and they would literally scream at me and say, I mean, it made my life very difficult for a while. And I can understand why. I was questioning their business model, a very successful business model, even if it wasn't a particularly successful product. But what's happening now is I see more and more that the companies are starting to copy us. Imitation, the most sincere form of flattery. So they're starting to do the same things that we're doing. But the good news is we're keeping a couple of steps ahead of them. We've got the vegan oil, we've got the Aqua X, which is pre-emulsified. And we have some other variants of balance oil, which should be coming on stream over the next 12 to 18 months.
Fantastic. And Dr. Paul, can I just ask about dosages? Okay, now there's a lot of things about, and there's a lot of questions about pregnant women. Okay, number one. Number two, if you have a chronic disease, and let's just call it diabetes, ADHD, all these man-made diseases that are out there, if you up the dosages, does that help, or is it better just to stick with the normal weight and measure dosage?
I would suggest that no matter where you're starting from, no matter what condition you're trying to modify, just stick with the mils per kilogram body weight recommended dose, because you can't speed up the change by increasing the dose. The rate limiting step is what's happening in the cell membranes, and that is something that we can't affect. So stick to the dose. Do another test in 4 months' time, see if that's been enough to get you to where you need to be. In most people it will be, in some people it won't be. In some people there may be a problem with absorbing the omega-3s, and if you have biliary insufficiency, then you can't emulsify the oil. You need to be using the Aqua X. If you have exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, not so common, but it does occur, then you will need to combine the balance oil with an exogenous lipase. And there are various products available on the market. Some people, even if they don't have a problem with their gallbladder, liver, or pancreas, still don't seem to absorb the omega-3s very well. And oddly enough, we find that in this group, by taking xenobiotic, by changing the microbiome, you can suddenly flip them into being good absorbers. Now, nobody knows quite why this is. I've written about this in one of my posts. I've got some ideas, but we haven't proven that yet. It's all a little bit hypothetical.
And Dr. Paul, just with that, with the absorption, okay, and those people, I've really found everybody that has those type of issues, I just flick them straight onto Aqua X, and they have great results. I really see amazing results.
Well, just to point out, Rob, Aqua X will solve the problem if you have biliary insufficiency, but it won't resolve exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, because there the body isn't secreting or producing enough of the lipase enzymes, which you need. So in that situation, I would recommend using a lipase, which is taking that enzyme exogenously, or you're getting it in a supplement form, swallowing that at pretty much the same time that you take the balance oil, and that replaces the missing pancreatic function.
Fantastic. Now, just on the xenobiotics, okay, and the protect, okay, for pregnant women, and again, I like to keep away from this subject, but there has been a question about it. Just talk to me in general, okay, about why xenobiotic is such an outstanding product in your opinion.
Well, gut health is obviously it's a problematic area, and we've seen enormous increases in the numbers of people presenting with IBS and IBD. And one of the factors underlying that clearly is the modern diet, because IBS and IBD are vanishingly rare in vestigial populations, and they used to be extremely uncommon if you go back 150 years and look at the mid-Victorian period. In fact, they practically didn't exist. And so this link between diet and gut health is being hammered out. There's a lot of evidence that indicates that it is due to a lack of prebiotic fiber in the gut. And we know that a lack of prebiotic fiber in the gut, and particularly prebiotic fiber, is associated with a dramatic increase in early, which means preventable death, from cancers of various sorts, from vascular diseases, all kinds of things like that. So the modern diet, particularly that very large part of it, which is ultra processed, and over there in Oz, you're consuming about 50% of your calories in these ultra processed foods. These foods are very, very low in prebiotic fiber. And if you don't eat the right kinds of fiber, then the gram-positive microbes, the probiotic species that live in your gut, they start starving. They basically they wither away, and they're replaced by gram-negative species, not all of which are bad, but all of which are coated in lipopolysaccharide, and that creates chronic inflammation in the large bowel, and then your problems start. You can try and rectify that by taking a probiotic, and there's a big industry to supply probiotics. The only little catch is they don't work. It's a bit like the fish oil industry, because when you're eating a yogurt or taking a capsule of probiotic species, you're taking lab-grown microbes, soft living, untrained basically, and you're throwing a very small number of them proportionately into basically the urban warfare of your large bowel, because that's colonized with far, far larger numbers of very aggressive species which have adapted to the environment and know how to fight their corner. So we know that the probiotics have very little impact, and the day you stop taking them is the day they disappear from the gut. What we do is we send in the fibers, which are the supplies that the few probiotics still living inside you, clinging on for dear life. They say, oh, thank heavens, here come the supplies. You're giving them the fuel that they need to multiply, to grow, and to start to displace and kill off the gram-negative species. Now, the gram-negative species are by and large very pro-inflammatory. As the probiotic species start to multiply, they break the fiber down into compounds including butyrate, and butyrate is highly anti-inflammatory. So by taking these prebiotic fibers, you're switching the microbiome from being pro-inflammatory to being anti-inflammatory. Now, you've got to be very careful about your prebiotic fibers, because they come in different lengths, they have different fermentation rates, they therefore work in different parts of the large bowel. And there was for a while a vogue for using fructooligosaccharides, which pretty much passed fairly quickly, because you can't use large doses of FOS. It creates all kinds of problems, and in fact we now know that it burns out so quickly, it's fermented so quickly, that you start increasing the probiotic species, but the FOS runs out. All these probiotic bacteria are there, but they no longer have any of the right fuel. They start using they switch to different types of fuels, and then they start producing compounds which are not good for you at all. So you need to have a blend of fibers which will support the multiplication and growth of these good bacteria all the way through their transit in the large bowel. So I worked on this for a long time, and it's a combination of 4 or 5 different prebiotic fibers, very small amounts of the very short fibers. So that starts the process. It's like the touch paper on a firework. But then as they burn up, they are replaced by the longer and therefore slower fibers. And as they are used up, they in turn are replaced by larger amounts of the even longer and even slower fibers. So it's like a relay race. The fastest runner starts first. There's a very small amount of that, a larger amount of the next one, a larger amount of the next one. And the largest component is resistant starch, which you get from sources like green banana. And if you were to use just that, the fermentation wouldn't start until you were probably 2/3 of the way through the barrel. So you can't use it on its own.